Hello, I'm Dina Titus, your representative from Nevada's 1st Congressional District. Congratulations to you, Ariana and Alexis, for being selected as this year's Do the Right Thing Challenge National Student Ambassadors from Las Vegas. I wish we could be together because I always enjoy meeting bright students like you when you come to Washington with this great program. Your writings are powerful examples of how bullying can profoundly affect students today in schools and online. I'm inspired by your resilience, your kindness, and motivation to channel your stories into helping others, educating the public, and advocating for policies to address the issue of bullying. As a member of Congress, I have the opportunity and responsibility to make sure those in need of an advocate can count on me. And as a former faculty member, I'm impressed by your writing and communication skills. Good writing is one of the keys to success in education, business, and politics. So I hope you'll keep writing, speaking up, and empowering others with your words. Thank you for sharing your stories and experiences with me. You are very brave.
Well, welcome to this year's National Recognition Weekend celebrating the Do the Right Thing Challenge program. First, I want to thank the National Campaign to Stop Violence for making this event possible. And I want to give a special shout out to Montana's very own Wyatt and Ansley for being selected for this very high honor. And your commitment to addressing and solving youth violence is so inspirational. You make Montana proud. God bless you all, and thanks for all you do.
I'd like to welcome everybody back to Day 2 of our 2020 Virtual Recognition Weekend. Although we miss seeing you in person, we are delighted to have you join us from across the country via Zoom, Facebook Live, and our other social media platforms. I have been a part of the Do the Right Thing community for the past 10 years. For some of you listening, you have also been part of this community for quite some time. For others, including our 2002 Student National Ambassadors, you are new to the community, or family as we sometimes say, and we are privileged to welcome you. These 2 days are meant to recognize and honor our students and celebrate them, but they are also meant to highlight that no matter the challenge or trauma, no one is ever alone, and we are bound together with all of us doing our part in this Do the Right Thing family to reduce youth violence. Each year, my heart is touched by these young students who open up a view into their world, into their experiences, and into their insights. I am always impressed by the hope and resilience that is expressed in the face of tragedy and trauma. I gain a perspective that is invaluable, as understanding and empathy seem to be in short supply these days among too many. I have a greater appreciation for the power that words can have in influencing, educating, and inspiring others, even when those words come from a 12, 13, or 14-year-old. Each year I am in awe of the courage of these young people who bravely break their silence in hopes of a better world. Today we have another program planned for you that we hope will encourage and inspire you. First, we will hear from the chairman of the National Campaign to Stop Violence, Dan CALLISTER. Dan was the visionary behind the Do the Right Thing Challenge. It was during his time as an attorney in Washington, D.C., that Dan read a troubling account of 2 young boys getting into a fight over a pair of sneakers. This fight escalated into gun violence. Dan's inquisitive mind wanted to know what would lead 2 young people to solve a problem in this way. What started off as one man asking one question has led to over 1.2 million young students submitting their responses over the past 25 years. After Dan's remarks, we will see and hear from the Do the Right Thing family and friends from around the globe. This includes supporters, previous participants, advocates, and individuals who have followed our organization's journey and continue to believe in what we do and in what you say. They will be reading excerpts from this year's Student National Ambassadors' essays and sharing encouragement and congratulations. Speaking of this year's Student National Ambassadors essays, one of the highlights of the National Recognition Week is placing the National Book of Writings, which is a compilation of the writings of our 2020 Student National Ambassadors, into the Library of Congress. COVID-19 was not going to get the better of this ceremony. So in spite of this event looking a little bit different, we have a recording of our 2 DC Student National Ambassadors with our chair of the DC Do the Right Thing program, Attorney General Carl Racine, recreating this auspicious event. Our work at the National Campaign to Stop Violence would not be possible without the generous support of the Kuwait America Foundation. Mr. Fawzi Al Sultan, the Vice Chair of the Kuwait America Foundation, is such an advocate for you young writers that for the past several years he has flown in from Kuwait, even for a few days, to meet with you. Although that is not possible this year, he will still be sending his message to you from Kuwait in the Middle East. Following Mr. Al Sultan's remarks, we have the great opportunity to hear from Dr. Clint Smith. Clint is a writer, a poet, and a scholar. I had the pleasure of meeting Clint several years ago when he shared his slam poetry with us at another Do the Right Thing recognition event. In minutes, I was enveloped by his poetry. His perspectives and words will give you pause and inspiration. Closing out our time together, Dendel Hoyt will favor us with her rendition of This Is Me. With that, may I remind you of our engagement rules, which were shared with you yesterday. Before the program proceeds, as I have just outlined, let me take this opportunity to thank everybody for joining us today and for tuning in from across the country. In these uncertain times, it is great for us to still have the chance to connect and to be inspired and to celebrate the courage of our students, the dedication of our teachers, the commitment of our chairs and coordinators, and the support of our family and friends. Please continue to share your experiences with us by using the hashtag DtWT2020 and by uploading your photos and videos to our website at DtWT2020.org. As I said in the beginning, we are a family and families stay in touch, so we want to hear from you. And now, our program.
25 years is a long time. 25 years ago, I was a practicing lawyer in Washington, D.C. And a very good man named Hassan al-Ibrahim came to me, said that he and his friends in Kuwait wanted to do something for the children of America, something to say thank you, something that might address the impact of violence in their lives. And the reason? Because American troops had risked their lives to liberate the children and the people of Kuwait from violence brought about by Saddam Hussein. Following that time, we started the program, Do the Right Thing Challenge. We've been doing it ever since. 25 years is a long time. This program could not possibly have continued that long without the help of thousands of volunteers and thousands of teachers. All of these volunteers and all of these teachers are motivated by one thing, and that is the words, the written words of students all around this country. This year, tens of thousands of students have written about the impact of violence on their life and what they think can be done to reduce violence in America. Sometimes the violence has been horrible, the loss of a brother or sister or a parent. Sometimes the violence impacts them in another way. It takes away their confidence as a result of bullying, or they're just scared. Whatever the reason, they've written about it in a very profound way. And these words have an impact on the reader. And these words are the reason why the program has continued. Every year we've brought some of these students and their families and their teachers to Washington, D.C. And we're grateful to our donors, including Southwest Airlines, who've helped do that. This year, it was impossible to do that. So we decided to make a best attempt to bring Do the Right Thing to you. A lot of work has been done by our wonderful staff in Washington so that we could show you a little bit about our program. And in particular, this month, all of the national ambassadors will be reading their essays online so that you can listen to how touching their stories are, and you can understand their optimism for America, for the future, and also the impact of violence on all of our lives. We hope you pay attention. We hope it educates you. And we want to congratulate, and particularly I want to congratulate, all of our national ambassadors.
Throughout history, throughout time, we had a song. Through it all, we made ourselves heard. We sing for freedom. We sing for equality. We would sing to get through, and we did. Everywhere you go, soul flows through everyone. One bullet can kill one physically, but hundreds mentally. Now young kids are scared. Fear caused choices. Choices cause solutions, and the solutions seem clear. Shoot or be shot. I've heard it before. A reload of a clip, the skirt of a car, a police siren, caution tape, then the classic, "I'm sorry, ma'am, there's not enough evidence to find who did it." It could never really happen to you, right? But in blinking an eye, my life as well as yours could be taken. When we give that child a chance, when we stand up for the weak, when we stop killing each other, we can start healing the pain. We fought so hard to be free, and now the issue is us. We've gone from steel to rust. Freedom's not a want, it's a must. This is not the America I trust. So let us be free again, and only by sharing the love and making an alliance can we spread the word and stop the violence. These are the words written by Tyler Willis, one of the 2020 Do the Right Thing student finalists and ambassadors from Washington, D.C. Tyler, as an ambassador of the National Campaign to Stop Violence and one of the DC winners in the very first cohort of the Do the Right Thing Challenge, I am elated and humbled to relay your words of expression as you've captured the essence of how the world is viewed through your lens and the lens of many. I congratulate you today on your commitment to be the voice, to speak up and stand up on how to stop violence. To the parents, guardians, educators, administrators, and state officials who have guided, but most importantly, who have listened to each young person as they encounter life challenges, thank you. Thank you for your guidance, your leadership, and encouragement to these brilliant young students who are their authentic selves and taking a just stand. And lastly, to all of the Do the Right Thing student finalists and now ambassadors, congratulations. We need people as yourself to be role models to your peers and those around you. Remember, this is not the end because you are the present and you can make a difference right here and right now. Your time is now to change this narrative. Just be the best person that you can and be that positive force. For years, we've heard each one reach one, but I challenge you today to reach many. You have that much power to reach many, not just through your words, but through your action. And it begins with you right now. I know that it may be difficult, but just stay faithful to the process and to your purpose. Once we all change our minds, life will change. So I wish you all the very best in your future endeavors. And I just can't wait to see all the wonderful works that you're going to do in the future and the impact that you will have on the world and future generations to come. Congratulations again. Thank you.
Good afternoon, and welcome to our reimagined and reinvented ceremony at the Library of Congress. If we had been able to have our national recognition event, as we have in the past 24 years, we would be inside this magnificent building. I know it is a highlight for me, and I know it's a highlight for our students. So as we were reimagining what National Recognition Week would look like, we could not let go of this event. In placing this book in the Library of Congress, as student national ambassadors, you are now published authors with pieces of writing in the largest and most prestigious library in the world. I hope you will continue with your writing. I hope you will continue to speak out and to realize the power that your words have. Although we would have loved to have had all 50 student national ambassadors with us to be part of this ceremony today, we are delighted to have two of our students, our DC national ambassadors, with us who will be representing all of you. They will be reading their essays, which are in the book that will be presented to the library this afternoon. Tyler Willis and AMARI Edmonds were both 8th graders last year in the DC Prep Benning Middle Campus. After they read, we will hear closing remarks from the Attorney General of Washington, D.C., Karl Racine. General Racine was sworn in as the DC's first elected Attorney General in 2015. He was re-elected in 2018. He is a fierce advocate for youth, and he plays this role so well in the Attorney General's office. But the role that we really love him in is as the chair of the Do the Right Thing program in DC, and he has been doing this for the past 4 years. We are grateful to Attorney General Racine and his staff for listening to the students of the Do the Right Thing program in DC. So we will have AMARI Edmonds read her essay first.
Have you ever lost a friend? How about a parent? Well, for children like me, this is our lives every day. Gun violence has taken my city and turned it upside down. All my life I've been told to hold the ones I love close to me because they could be here one day and gone tomorrow. I've grown up with children and saw them here one day and gone the next. Gun violence is snatching my friends and family from me left and right. When I was on spring break vacation, I found out my dad had been shot 5 times and left to die in his own car. I didn't even find out from my mom or his parents. I found out through social media. Seeing his face all over Instagram and seeing his name with the phrase RP in front of it made me really sad. All I could do was drop down to my knees and cry. Hearing my mom scream at night because of it made me not sleep for days after I found out. This was the first time I had lost someone close to me, but it wouldn't be the last. Just the other day, I found out my childhood friend had been shot in his throat and left to bleed out in the alley. I've been crying myself to sleep every night because just like me, he had dreams that he would never be able to see succeed. The authorities have done nothing to help. This problem has been going on for years. If you ask me why, I won't be able to give you a straight answer. Every day a person is dying because of something new. But the simplest way I could put it is jealousy. I always say to my friends and people around me that you'll leave DC in a body bag before you leave out on a flight. This city is full of people who kill out of spite and jealousy. People are killing over clothes, shoes, and money, all because they have these things while other people do not. The worst of them all is just being in the right place at the wrong time. Many of the people in DC have died, weren't even intended to be the target. They are often hit by stray bullets or sometimes are with people who aren't good to be around. Because of this, they suffer. As of 2019, there are 160 homicides in DC, causing my neighborhood and violence and personal beef. Already in 2020, March is now beginning. There have been 30 homicides in DC. Citizens in DC claim that the system is failing us when we really are failing each other. We kill each other without even knowing what we're going through. The homicide rate in D.C. is so high because all citizens in D.C. don't value each other's lives. Many people that aren't truly from D.C. will say we need to put the guns down or ban guns, but that isn't enough. We as a community have to start from the roots. We need to take these kids out of the streets and we need to put them in programs. We must teach the next generation that it's okay to show emotions. The main reason the violence rate in D.C. is so high is because our youth is being taught at a very young age that violence is the answer. Teaching our kids the phrase "killed or be killed" will only wipe us out as a whole. We must thrive together and succeed together or we will fall as one. When I see Black children, fathers, and mothers in the headline, it makes me think of how much we are embarrassing ourselves. We have to change it very soon. We need to create the programs and teach our young Black kids before it's too late.
Throughout history, throughout time, we had a song. Through it all, we will make ourselves heard. We sing for freedom, we sing for equality, and we sing to get through it all. So we finished the song, but the beat went on. Younger than 18 with a dream, ending someone's nightmare with a bullet, waking up afraid with the possibility that one day they'd be on the other side of the gun. Heads up, eyes up. Don't look, don't scream, don't make yourself known, don't make yourself heard, or you'll be on the sidewalk waiting for the bird screech. How violence has affected me: my uncle got shot dead, Uncle Richard. My cousin got shot but survived, DeAndre. My neighbor got shot before I moved. My sister's in an abusive relationship. My friend's cousin got killed and they can't find the killer. My aunt's baby father left and my dad died of cancer when I was 7. Everywhere you go, soul flows through everyone. One bullet can kill one physically, but hundreds mentally. Like that one death will make a difference. And now young kids are scared, and fear causes choices, and choices cause solutions, and the solutions are clear. Shoot or be shot. The figure is their father figure, and the gang is their family. One more dead body is nothing new to see. I grew up without a father that died of cancer. Many others grew up without a father because they left, died, or divorced. My mom was all my support. Their moms were depressed. I went to school while they went to sell a pound. I packed the lunch, they packed the M9. One false move and that could have been me. They say life is short and death is uncertain. That's an understatement for some. They know no better, so they became no better than another body. But it can never happen to you, right? But in one blink of an eye, my life as well as yours can be taken by that same kid who begged for $1, that same kid who played at your playground, that same kid who packed a gun in his pocket, that same kid you thought would amount to nothing. Just another body, right? I've seen it before. The reload of a clip, skirt of a car, police sirens, caution tape, and the classic, "I'm sorry, ma'am, that's not enough evidence to find out who did it." They don't care. We don't care. We're killing ourselves. They know it and we know it because we live for no one else. Why would we? Why would we care about somebody else's when we had a bad day? We say we love our skin color, but we're traded in an instant. We trust nobody, so we die for the ones we trust. But we're quick to kill for them too. Is life a gift? Is death uncertain? Will we be able to see the next song play? The truth is, you never know till the gun passes. Violence is everywhere. The gentlest of people, the youngest of hearts, it's in everyone. But when we give that child a chance, when we stand up for the weak, when we start helping each other, that's when the violence ends. We fought so hard to be free, and now the problem is us. And only by sharing the love and making an alliance can we spread the word and stop the violence.
Good afternoon. My name is Carl Racine, and I'm the Attorney General of the District of Columbia. It's a proud and privileged honor to be here with you today to celebrate two momentous events. First, it's the 25th year of the National Campaign to Stop Violence. In that 25 years, the National Campaign to Stop Violence has been managing the Do the Right Thing challenge. The challenge is an essay contest where middle schoolers are asked about violence. Violence that they've experienced, violence that they've encountered, and most importantly, solutions that they have that adults like me should have to ameliorate or decrease the violence. Now get this, these students, and this year, over 80,000 students participated by writing essays. And there were 1 or 2 winners from each jurisdiction. From the District of Columbia, we had 2 spectacular winners, AMARI and Tyler. And I know that you've heard their stunningly brilliant essays. They also go to the same school, or should I say they attended the same school last year at Benning Prep, and they had a fabulous teacher Ms. Watkins, who helped guide them for their winning essays. What's really important is that their essays, along with the winning essays from all across the country, go into a bound book, this book, and it gets deposited into the Library of Congress, one of the world's grandest libraries. And so the students, including AMARI and Tyler from Washington, D.C., will be published authors after their book goes into the Library of Congress. I really encourage you to take your time and read these essays. The essays are profound, they are deep, and they have a lot of wisdom in it. It's our job as adults to not just tell young people what to do, but to listen to young people and be smart enough to take their ideas on important issues like violence. Now, these student ambassadors will go on to be leaders in the future. And so I want to encourage their leadership. And I can't wait for Tyler or AMARI to one day be standing where I'm standing now and be the Attorney General, or be the Congressperson from the District of Columbia, or be the mayor for the District of Columbia, and be focused on making the lives of children safer so that everyone can have a great education and everyone can be safe. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Rami Abdelnabi, and I'm going to read an excerpt from Houston, Texas, Do the Right Thing National Student Ambassador Zain Ziad's essay submission. Here we go. Violence has affected my life in a catastrophic way by forcing my family and I to evacuate from our home country, Iraq. This had started before I was born, but the effects rippled through and were still seen from 2003 until the present day, all from a civil war within Iraq. Eventually, my mother was threatened for being a doctor, and that was when we had to leave our home country for many years and move to Syria. We began realizing that the Middle East would not be safe for us at this time to continue living, so we moved to America. This instance of violence had affected my life and has pushed me farther away from my home country to avoid being injured or even dying. There are many ways people can help stop youth violence, and it all starts with not letting others be influenced. For instance, if there was a student who was always separated and called names, they could be a potential source for violence. Most often, the student being bullied either at home or at school is scared to talk about it or doesn't know how. And therefore, you cannot wait for them to engage and begin the conversation. The longer you wait to speak to them, the worse they may feel, and the higher chance of them already thinking about trying to hurt someone or themselves. Even though it may not seem like talking to them could solve anything, it can. Just having someone they can vent to can make all the difference. If you feel unequipped to talk about any problems, you could instead speak to a trusted adult. Usually a teacher, parent, relative, or even counselor could help the student. Everyone can help stop youth violence and is asked to. Every step you take in trying to stop youth violence can lead to someone trying to follow you. This is the domino effect we are looking for, one that continues a chain of good deeds and helpful actions. With this, we would hopefully eventually stop all wars on this planet and work as one in the hopes of helping our world. I want to congratulate Zain and all of the Do the Right Thing National Student Ambassadors, parents, and educators. We're proud of you. Congratulations.
Greetings to everyone from Kuwait. This is a difficult year for all of us in America, Kuwait, and around the world. Youth and children have been the most vulnerable to changes in school learning, seeing friends, and unfortunately, more violence. This is why it's important for all of us to work together and help one another. Thank you again to everyone that have made it possible for our youth to share their thoughts, feelings, and stories. Sharing your thoughts through your essays gives children all over the country strength to face similar experiences. I'm honored to be part of Do the Right Thing project and delighted to support all those who have made this project a success and have continued to be dedicated and committed to working with children across America. Thank you. Stay safe.
Hi, I'm reading an excerpt from Alicia Jackson from Palm Beach, Florida. I was molested by a relative when I was 9 years old. This incident damaged me so badly that I ended up going to the hospital. But this was not the only consequence that I ended up having to endure. I struggled in relationships with my peers and family members because I had a difficult time trusting other people. This led me to misinterpret actions of kindness. When I was telling my mother what happened, I spoke with periods of silence between each detail. With each interruption of silence came a great deal of pain for me. I still remember his face, the touch, the smell, the clothing, the bathroom counter, the blood. In school, my peers playfully hit each other and hugged each other when they see other friends in the hallway. People call me germophobic because I didn't like to be touched, when the real reason is that each friendly touch triggers memories of what happened. I reacted with hostility to disguise my pain. Whenever my words about the memory tried to come out, I choked and struggled. People say to speak up, but it's easier said than done. I felt isolated from the world, and I did not want people to pity me or treat me differently because of my past experiences. I had a difficult time articulating my emotions when I tried to release them, so I kept them hidden. I became quiet and withdrawn and began to focus on my academics. I also started to get bullied for my germophobic tendencies. This made me vulnerable to all types of insults, with each one making me feel like I was stabbed with a knife. This caused me to think about taking the pills from my mother's bathroom and escaping reality right then and there. It caused me to lose weight because I lost my appetite. I distanced myself from others to avoid the uncomfortable feeling that I had from socializing with people. In conclusion, a force is slowly consuming this world as the years go by. It is negatively affecting lives and taking them. This force, known as violence, is very powerful. However, there is a stronger force, kindness. With kindness, the dark force known as violence can be wiped out. This force positively affects lives, and it does not take from them. This force comes in a variety of forms, such as volunteering in organizations around the world that work together to end violence, being a role model for your peers, giving attention to those who are neglected, giving comfort to those who are abused, promoting peace on social media, and raising the self-esteem of others. The phrase, "one apple a day keeps the doctor away," is just like how one act of kindness can prevent numerous acts of violence. Congratulations to Alicia and the other 2020 Do the Right Thing student ambassadors, as well as their teachers and parents.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to day 2 of our Do the Right Thing National Recognition Weekend. Once again, I'm Shireen Abdelnabi, Program Director for the Kuwait America Foundation, the founder and primary sponsor of the Do the Right Thing Challenge program. I think I can confidently speak for our entire DtWT team when I say that I have thus far been blown away by our generous speakers, our honest conversations, and the heartfelt messages and readings we've received from around the country and around the world. I know today will be no different. Although COVID has kept us apart physically, I have certainly felt very connected to all of you. We are extremely privileged to have someone whom I'm very excited to introduce joining us this afternoon, Dr. Clint Smith. For those of us that are not familiar with Clint's work, Clint is a staff writer at The Atlantic and author of the poetry collection, Counting Dissent, which won the award for Best Poetry Collection from the Black Caucus of the American Library Association. He has been a finalist for an NAACP Image Award and is the author of the forthcoming nonfiction book, How the World is Past. His writing has been published in The New Yorker, The New York Times Magazine, Poetry Magazine, The Paris Review, and elsewhere. Previously, Clint taught high school English in Prince George's County, Maryland, which is right around the corner from here in Washington, D.C., and currently teaches writing and literature in the D.C. Central Detention Facility. Born and raised in New Orleans, one of my favorite cities in the world, Clint received his BA in English from Davidson College and a PhD in education from Harvard University. Additionally, The New Yorker and his Twitter feed tell me he is a soccer fan. Arsenal, I believe. As a Liverpool and Mohamed Salah supporter, I promise to not hold that against him. So Dr. Smith, thank you so much for taking the time to be here with us on a Sunday afternoon.
Thank you for being here. I will not hold it against you that you are a Liverpool fan, but we'll somehow manage to get past it.
We'll work through it. So I know I've just shared your very impressive bio, but I wonder if I might also share a clip that encapsulates how I first came to know you, your 2014 TED Talk entitled The Danger of Silence.
Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., in a 1968 speech where he reflects upon the civil rights movement, states, "In the end, we will remember not the words of our enemies, but the silence of our friends." As a teacher, I've internalized this message. Every day all around us, we see the consequences of silence manifest themselves in the form of discrimination, violence, genocide, and war. In the classroom, I challenge my students to explore the silences in their own lives through poetry. We work together to fill those spaces, to recognize them, to name them, to understand that they don't have to be sources of shame. In an effort to create a culture within my classroom where students feel safe sharing the intimacies of their own silences, I have 4 core principles posted on the board that sits in the front of my class, which every student signs at the beginning of the year. Read critically, write consciously, speak clearly, tell your truth. I find myself thinking a lot about that last point, tell your truth. And I realized that if I was going to ask my students to speak up, I was going to have to tell my truth and be honest with them about the times where I failed to do so. So I tell them that growing up, as a kid in a Catholic family in New Orleans, during Lent, I was always taught that the most meaningful thing one could do was to give something up. Sacrifice something you typically indulge in to prove to God you understand His sanctity. I've given up soda, McDonald's, French fries, French kisses, and everything in between. But one year, I gave up speaking. Figured the most valuable thing I could sacrifice was my own voice, but it was like I hadn't realized that I had given that up a long time ago. I had spent so much of my life telling people the things they wanted to hear instead of the things they needed to. Told myself I wasn't meant to be anyone's conscience because I still had to figure out being my own, so sometimes I just wouldn't say anything. Appeasing ignorance with my silence, unaware that validation doesn't need words to endorse its existence. When Christian was beat up for being gay, I put my hands in my pocket and walked with my head down as if I didn't even notice. Couldn't use my locker for weeks because the bolt on the lock reminded me of the one I had put on my lips when the homeless man on the corner looked at me with eyes up, merely searching for an affirmation that he was worth seeing. I was more concerned with touching the screen of my Apple than actually feeding him one. When the woman at the fundraising gala said, "I'm so proud of you. It must be so hard teaching those poor, unintelligent kids," I bit my lip because apparently we needed her money more than my students needed their dignity. We spend so much time listening to the things people are saying that we rarely pay attention to the things they don't. Silence is the residue of fear. It is feeling your flaws Gut-wrench guillotine your tongue. It is the air retreating from your chest because it doesn't feel safe in your lungs. Silence is Rwandan genocide. Silence is Katrina. It is what you hear when there aren't enough body bags left. It is the sound after the noose is already tied. It is charring. It is chains. It is privilege. It is pain. There is no time to pick your battles when your battles have already picked you. I will not let silence wrap itself around my indecision. I will tell Christian that he is a lion, a sanctuary of bravery and brilliance. I will ask that homeless man what his name is and how his day was, because sometimes all people want to be is human. I will tell that woman that my students can talk about transcendentalism like their last name was Thoreau, and just because you watch one episode of The Wire doesn't mean you know anything about my kids. So this year, instead of giving something up, I will live every day as if there were a microphone tucked under my tongue, a stage on the underside of my inhibition. Because who has to have a soapbox when all you've ever needed is your voice? Thank you.
Amazing. Let's give a round of Zoom applause for that if we can, right? I am blown away by that every single time. So I think that's a great starting point for our conversation. There are so many things that I love about this piece, and it is very much a performance piece. One of the things I love is that I find new things to appreciate about it, to think about, to reflect upon, to take as a lesson, and to implement. One of the lines that resonates with me the most is, "We spend so much time listening to the things people are saying that we rarely pay attention to the things they don't." So I'd like to begin there, if we can, with the silences, the ones you challenge students to address in your own. Dr. Smith, if you would indulge us, how did you come to recognize the silences in all of us and realize their impact? Was there a singular moment?
Yeah, so this poem, well, thank you all for having me so much. I'm really honored and thrilled to be here. Is everybody able to hear me? Can you hear me all right? Okay, good. I just always want to double check because I have two toddlers who spill juice and water on my laptop all the time. You just never know when the volume's going to act up. So this poem was, I was a high school English teacher for several years before I went to graduate school and got my doctorate. And there was an initiative that was going on in our school that made probably is similar to initiatives that have happened in many of the schools you all work in and attend. It was a big anti-bullying initiative. And so, you know, we were meant to talk to our students about how it was important to push back against verbal and physical and emotional abuse. If you saw something, if you saw somebody being verbally or physically abused, you were supposed to say something to a teacher. You were supposed to say something to an administrator, say something to an adult, and make sure that that you didn't just stand and watch as someone was abused, again, either verbally or physically. And I was, you know, we were told from the administration to communicate this to our students, and I was telling my students this. They kind of gave us a script of what to say, and I realized that as I was telling my students this, you know, my 14, 15, 16-year-olds, that in many ways I was asking them to do something that I wasn't necessarily willing to always do myself. That I was asking my students to, if you see somebody doing something or saying something, even if it doesn't directly impact you or your friends or somebody you know, then it is you have a responsibility to stand up against it, to either intervene yourself or to intervene, you know, let an adult know so that they can intervene on that person's behalf. And I thought about, you know, all of the times that I failed to speak up in my own life, all of the times where I saw something happening and I said, oh, well, that's none of my business, or, oh, you know, I really shouldn't involve myself in that, or that's not right, but I felt scared to involve myself because I thought of the implications of what it might be. To give, you know, I think about all the times when I was a kid, when I was in a locker room and other boys were saying things that were sexist and saying things that were homophobic. And the times when I was young, when I, even if I didn't agree with it, even if I found it offensive, that I didn't say anything because I didn't want to be the one person to say like, hey, you shouldn't say that about that person, or hey, you shouldn't say that about that group of people. I think about all the times, where I've been in situations where someone has said, may have said something, made a joke that was that was both offensive and also meant in jest about a different ethnic group or a different racial group, and all of the times that I failed to say anything. And I thought about part of what shifted my thinking was thinking about like how would I feel if I knew that somebody I love, somebody I considered a friend or family member, or someone who I had a good relationship with, it doesn't even have to be someone I was close to. What if they were in a room where someone was saying something hurtful, offensive, violent against Black people, for example? And if I knew that that person was in that room and didn't say anything, and didn't say that's not okay, or didn't say you shouldn't say that, or didn't say like that's not cool, that's not, whatever iteration of intervention is relevant in the moment, it would be deeply hurtful to me to know that that person was there and didn't say something, and that their silence allowed the language of that sort of violence to fester. And I think it's important, and I allude to this in the poem, to always think about the way that silence, even though it may start as just a sexist joke in the locker room, ultimately can manifest itself as like very real physical violence against people, right? What begins as a sort of verbal abuse, even in the form of a joke, is not disconnected from the incredibly discouraging rates of domestic abuse that we see, the incredible rates of violence against women that we see. Those begin somewhere, right? And they begin in these spaces where language about women, to continue with this example, goes unchallenged, and is allowed to make it seem as if a certain sort of violent language around women is okay. And then ultimately it manifests itself into physical violence in ways that are deeply unsettling. So always thinking about like something that even the defense are like, oh, it's just a joke, or oh, it's just nobody's hurting anybody, we're just like saying some things. That one, language isn't in and of itself can be deeply hurtful. Many of us know that. And then two, it rarely stops with the language, right? The language serves as a sort of pathway to a violence that can be even more hurtful in a physical way.
And I think that ties in so well with what our students are writing about and what they're saying. We had a great conversation yesterday about bullying and speaking up about it. And so many of them in their writings speak to that, and also speak to the violence that does move from bullying into something further. And, they are, I would consider, probably other silence breakers and writers in themselves. And so I want to ask, what more can we do to support them? So they are now in middle school, and what can we do to support them on this journey and to help them tell their truths and to really continue to break the silence when they see something?
Yeah, I mean, it is an incredibly, I think sometimes people can show up in these sort of forums and say like, oh, you just have to, if you see something, say something, it's that simple. I think it's important to acknowledge that it is difficult, right? That it is hard. It is hard to be, at your kitchen table with your family, and, your Uncle Joe says something that is racist, or your Uncle Joe says something that's homophobic or transphobic or xenophobic, the list goes on and on. It's one thing to know that you should say something, and it's another thing to, in that moment, surrounded by people you love, surrounded by family members, to bring that up, because it's uncomfortable. And I think that we shouldn't pretend, when having these conversations with young people, that these are easy conversations to have, right? Because if so, we're not fully preparing them for the discomfort of the moment, and it's uncomfortable because the stakes are high, right? Because oftentimes the people who need to hear this most, and the people who going to be most open, or not even necessarily open, but who our commentary will stick to in a different way, are people who are close to us, right? So it's not about going up to somebody you've never met in your life and you see them doing something on the street and saying something. I mean, that is important, but what is more common is like your friend says something about somebody in the cafeteria, right? Or what's more common is that one of your parents say something that's not necessarily aligned with your values. What's more common is that, your brother or your sister or people in your life who you already have these meaningful relationships with say something that makes you either is quite explicitly not okay, or that makes you feel uncomfortable. And I think it is important to lean into that and to say, it is uncomfortable, it is hard. Not every intervention has to look the same. You don't have to, I think the way that people tend to think about these things is that, like, if you don't say something like in that moment and stand up on top of the table in the lunchroom and say, that is not okay, we are going to live in a country, or this is going to be a school of tolerance and equity. Like, you don't have to give a diversity statement, every time something like this happens. But I think that part of it is depending on the situation, depending on the person, figuring out what is the best way to communicate this to that person. Some people might not respond well to being publicly shamed in a way, right? So like if someone says something, at a dinner table or at a lunch table, the full extent of like your conversation with that person might be best had off to the side rather than in front of everybody else, because people, there's loads of social science that shows that people don't respond well to being shamed, and they're less likely to have any level of empathy or be willing to listen to what you're trying to tell them than if you show them a level of not even respect, but think about how if you said something that you didn't, and we do this all the time, and this has happened to me. You've said something, for example, I'll give a specific example. So something that I'm trying to do much better in my own life is not to use ableist language. And it's something that I've taken for granted, right? Like I'm not disabled. I don't have a lot of close family members who are disabled or young, and so I've learned a lot from people in the disability community about what sort of language, the implications of like the types of language I use. So something I used to say all the time was like, that's crazy. Like, oh, that's so crazy. In my mind, I've never understood it to be something that could potentially be offensive to someone. But after, I remember, I think I tweeted something, a couple of years ago, like, oh, that's so crazy. And someone, I think there's especially on social media, what could happen is like somebody could quote tweet you and say like, look at Clint using ableist language. This is so terrible. And if someone did that, they might, be, it's not to say that they are wrong to do that, but I recognize that I would respond differently to that than the fact that like someone I know who is disabled sent me a direct message after I tweeted that and was like, hey, Clint, I'm not sure if you were aware, but like it's important to, like, saying something is crazy is pretty ableist and is like making light of mental illness, which is like a very real thing. And this is somebody who had struggled with mental illness themselves. And so that sort of intervention was really helpful. I deleted the tweet. I put out something after it. I was like, I've used this sort of language. I want to apologize. But it came from a place of love. It came from a place of like, I know that I don't think you mean it this way, but let me let you know how your language or the things that you're saying are impacting other people and how it's impacting me. And I appreciated that so much because it extended, there was so much grace and generosity in the way that they extended the opportunity for me to learn, that they didn't have to, right? Like learning can be much messier than that. And sometimes it's okay for it to be a lot messier than that. But I think that's an example in my case, of a sort of way that someone let me know that something I did was hurtful in ways that I didn't fully recognize, and then allowed me the opportunity. Not, they didn't say like, you have to do this, but allowed me the opportunity to try to make amends for it.
So speaking of language and the power of language, what would you say is the connection for you between language and your writing and your views on the world? So how do they inform one another? How do you use that as a tool for your own, advocacy for change?
Yeah, I mean, I think the language we use matters a lot. I mean, obviously, we've talked a little bit about this in the previous questions, but I'm a writer, and what I think about all the time is language. I think about words. I think about sentences. I think about what are the right ways. How can we be precise in what we are trying to say? Like, part of what I love, as a writer and as a poet, part of what I think most about is sort of granular level observations. And I think part of a problem that happens in our sort of contemporary discourse is that people make huge generalizations, or people use the personal plural. Like, when something that I've been thinking a lot about is when we say we. And so I actually have, I wonder if I can pull it up. So I have a poem. This is you always didn't schedule me to read a poem, but I'll read this poem because it's one I've been thinking about, that I think speaks directly to this. Let me just pull it up. It's called When People Say We Have Made It Through Worse Before. And it originated from this sense of, from my own, in the past, I've used the word we to say, like, we need to do this, or we need to be better, or we should say this, or we should do this, and sometimes I would use it in like, and saying we as a sort of collective. I think, one, it was like unclear who that we was. Like, when I say we, are we talking about my family? Am I talking about my family? Am I talking about Black people? Am I talking about Silver Spring, Maryland? Am I talking about the US? Am I talking about the world? Like, who is the we? I think we is a word that's often used in a really imprecise way. And it also undermines the people who are saying or doing that thing. So if I said, we need to talk about child hunger more, even if something that is originating from like a good place, it's originating from, if I said something like that or tweeted something like that, it's coming from a sense of frustration or disillusionment by the state of child poverty and hunger that exists in this moment. But if I say we, like, who am I talking about we? Who, there are people out there who advocate, are doing advocacy work around child hunger every single day. And if I'm, is my language suggesting erasing their work or suggesting that their work is not? And it's this, you can maintain the sentiment, but be more precise about who you mean when you say something like that. So I say that because I think with language, there's part of what we need to make sure we're doing is when we speak, not speaking in generalities, being precise about who and what we mean. And I think that helps, because a lot of sort of misunderstandings in our social lives and politics originates from miscommunication, and people sort of, and part of it is because our political lives are so like, this is how this group of people vote, or this is how this group demographic votes, or this is how this area votes, or this is how this state, and that we don't often think about the sort of nuances that exist in people's social, political, and personal lives, right? That like we are all messy and complicated and like don't fit neatly into sort of boxes or archetypes. But I'll read this poem because I think it speaks to the sense of the idea of the we, and this is where it came from. And I think it speaks to this moment. When people say we have made it through worse before, all I hear is the wind slapping against the gravestones of those who did not make it, those who did not survive to see confetti fall from the sky, those who did not live to watch the parade roll down the street. I've grown accustomed to a lifetime of aphorisms meant to assuage my fears. Pithy sayings meant to convey that everything ends up fine in the end. But there is no solace in rearranging language to make a different word tell the same lie. Sometimes the moral arc of the universe does not bend in a direction that will comfort us. Sometimes it bends in ways we don't expect, and there are people who fall off in the process. Please, dear reader, do not say that I am hopeless. I believe there is a better future to fight for. I simply accept the possibility that I may not live to see it. I've grown weary of telling myself lies that I might one day begin to believe. We are not all left standing after the war has ended. Some of us have become ghosts by the time the dust has settled.
Incredible. This actually, I'm quite happy that you shared that poem, because I read a quote from you that said, poetry is a means of asking yourself about the world and why it exists the way it does, and why and how you are positioned within the world in the way that you are. So I wanted to know, how and when did poetry become your medium of expression of choice? I know you identify as a writer, author, poet, scholar, podcast host, but why poetry?
Yeah, so I've loved poetry since a young age. I mean, my mom has, down in New Orleans, has a journal that I used to keep, and I would write poems after soccer practice, and write poems while we were waiting in the drive-through at McDonald's, and I was just always writing. And then I sort of, I thought I was going to become a professional soccer player, and that became my primary focus. And I did not become a professional soccer player, but it's okay. That's why I grasp onto Arsenal so tight. I thought I was going to be Thierry Henry, but it didn't work out that way. And I think that I remember, so I went to college and I was an English major, and I was 19 and at a point where I was feeling sort of frustrated by some of the texts we were reading. We were reading Keats and Yeats and Frost and Ezra Pound and all folks who represent the sort of the essence of the Western literary canon. And I just felt I wasn't connecting to their work in a way that I felt like I was supposed to be. And that summer, I lived in New York City for an internship, and I went to a place with a friend called the New Eurekan Poets Cafe. And New Eurekan Poets Cafe is in the Lower East Side of Manhattan, and it's one of the most legendary poetry cafes in the entire world. And I went that night, and I had never seen literature look the way that it did as it did that evening. So it's a spoken word cafe, and you step in, and the types of people who were there, types of poems that I heard were just so dynamic and so reflective of the world that I saw around me. People who were writing about struggling with depression, people who were writing about struggling with racism, people who were writing about gentrification, people who were writing about struggling with their sexual orientation, people who were writing about all manner of things. And I remember this one woman came up and she did a poem about living with cerebral palsy. And again, disability is not something that has ever sort of existed at the forefront of my consciousness. It's not something I ever actively thought about. But this woman got on stage and did this poem about living with this disability. And in 3 minutes, the way I thought about an entire demographic of people had completely changed. I never thought about disability the same way again after I left that night. And that was so remarkable to me, that I could walk into a room thinking about the world one way and leave that room the same night thinking about the world completely differently. That was 2008, so that was 12 years ago, right? And it forever shifted my perspective on an issue that I had never fully considered. And then you have the other poems that, people got on stage and wrote poems that spoke to my life in a way that I wish I could have written myself, right? That feeling when you read something or you hear something, it can be a song, it can be a poem, it can be a novel, and you're like, this is how I've been feeling, and I just never knew how to say it. And so I think the power of literature and the power of poetry is that it both provides this opportunity to this really remarkable sort of opportunity for a sort of radical empathy to experience the world through someone else's perspective in a way that is profoundly unique, and then also to experience a part of yourself you know, in someone else's words, and to be able to say, oh, I felt this way and I didn't even know that it could be said in that sort of way, and the level of resonance that happens. And so I left that night, I was like, I don't know what this is, but I want to do it. Because I'm not a naturally performative person. You know, it's even fascinating watching these TED videos from years ago, because I was just like, if you had told me, you know, years before that I would be on stages and doing these kind of things, that is not my personality at all. But I recognized its power and its efficacy, and I just worked at it. And I wrote a lot of bad poems for a very long time. I still write a lot of bad poems. The world just doesn't see most of them. But I think that's the other thing about being a writer, is that I think sometimes people can expect, like, if you don't sit down and write something great the first time, then you're like, oh, I'm not a writer. But I think about it the same way that I do playing an instrument, or, you know, playing a sport, where it's like, you don't show up to the recital and just like know how to play the clarinet perfectly. You don't show up to the game and know how to, you know, make 3-pointers. There's a lot of work that you do that people never see, that is preparing you for the thing that you will present to the world. And writing is the same thing. The vast majority of the things that I write, the world will never see. You know, I just finished a nonfiction book that was 300 pages, and I probably wrote 150 pages before I got to the first page that would be the book. You know, and so I like failed for months, you know, before I ultimately got to what the book would be about. And I think that's part of what it means to be a person. That's part of what it means to be human. That's part of what it means to be a writer. And I think it's something to be embraced, you know, rather than something that we should run away from.
Students, take note, keep writing, and we're listening, we're here. Even if the first draft isn't great, move on to the second, right? I have so many more questions for you, but I do want to open it up to our audience. So we'll proceed that way. We are going to do it the same as we did yesterday, using the hand raise on Zoom, as well as if you want to ask the question yourself, or if you feel more comfortable, put it in the chat and we will read it for you. So please feel free to ask your questions. We have one in the chat already. It says, hi, Dr. Smith. Thank you so much for being here today. It's an honor and privilege to hear you speak to us all. What strategies would you recommend to students to help them develop their writing?
The most important thing you can do to develop your writing is to read. Is to read as much as you can. Read books of every genre, on every topic. Listen to audiobooks are a great option. Sometimes people sort of like look down on audiobooks, but I find them, one of my favorite things that I do is listen to novels on audiobook novels while I do the dishes and while I do laundry, because there's so many books that I want to read. You can see behind me, like, I love books. It's what I think about all the time. And there's so many that are on my list that I can't get to, you know, part of it because I have 2 kids, and like, but audiobooks are great because they allow me the opportunity to, you know, when I'm on a walk or on a run or doing the dishes, to still, you have to actively listen. You know, you can't just, it's not something that you can passively just put in your headphones and then sort of daydream about other things. But I think not enough people give audiobooks credit for what they offer, and I think they're a really good thing. But yeah, read as much as you can. It is and read like a writer. So part of what that means is when you read something that moves you, when you read something that feels especially that really tugs at your heart, or a sentence that you thought was especially beautiful, just take a second and look at that sentence and try to understand how the author constructed. What is a word that they used that you thought was really fascinating? For example, you know, I remember I was reading a book just a few days ago, and the author said the way the rain freckled on the sidewalk. And I never thought, and I was like, oh, that's such a beautiful way to use the word freckle. Like, freckle is a noun. I never thought about freckle as a verb, but the image was so beautiful and so clear. And so I wrote the word freckle. I underlined the sentence in the book and made a dog ear, and made note of it, right? Because those are the types of things, when you notice that other writers are doing well, that you can incorporate into your own writing. And, you know, if you're also a poet, there's like loads of, I'd also say I love listening to interviews that writers do. So something that I do for myself is every time I finish a book, I go on YouTube and look up interviews that the writer has done, because I love listening to the writer talk about the book after I've read it. And there are also podcasts that the writer, interviews that the writer does. So I kind of make like a book club for myself. Like if I, you know, every book that I read, then I'll go read what people have written about the book. I'll go listen to what the author is saying about the book. And it allows the book to stay with me in a different sort of way as well.
Excellent. I think we have, no, go ahead, Jenica.
Yeah, I was just going to say we have a student, Jamin, who would like to speak and ask you a question on camera. So we're just going to unmute him now.
Let's do it.
First of all, I just want to mention your public speaking and the confidence I just got from listening, from just the video and just listening to you in general. I mean, it's truly an inspiration. And thinking of you, this is just a comment, sorry, by the way. Thinking that you might have been a shy person, I can't imagine that one bit. I mean, just looking at you, it's truly an inspiration. But regarding writing, I want to specify on the poems. I'm not exactly good at poetry, but do you have any suggestions on getting better at writing poetry specifically?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the best ways is to find so when you find a poet that you like, to try to find poets that they, you know, that they cite. I think one of the cool things about the moment that we live in now is that you can find a lot of writers on social media. And so, like, you know, if I love somebody's book, and I'll go follow them on social media, and oftentimes those writers are posting about the books that they like, and the poets they like, and the poems they like. So, you know, I follow a lot of poets whose work I love, and they'll post a poem by someone else, and that allows me to find new writers in that way. When I was coming up as a writer, I wasn't reading as much poetry, but I was watching a lot of it. And so there are YouTube channels where like Button Poetry that have loads and loads of videos of people who are reading their poems aloud, right? And they're at poetry slams or at open mics or at spoken word events. And I think that that's a really good way to see how people, especially from the perspective of performance, right? Like that's how I learned to perform my poetry, is by going to these places and watching people perform and seeing like, when did they go faster? When did they go slower? When did they raise their voice? When did they lower their voice? What sort of language were they using? And how did they move their body when they did it? I studied it the same way that I studied, you know, when I was a soccer player, that I would watch Ronaldinho videos and Ronaldo videos and try to figure out like, all right, how do I do this step over? How do I like trap the ball this way? And I think anything you want to do well, I think you should study it, and you should study the people who do it well, and you should study the people who came before you. And I just kind of obsess over it, you know, like I'll find one writer and I'll like, who I love, and I'll just like look at all their videos and look at all their interviews and read all the things that they've written. And then you practice yourself. You do it over and over and over again. And again, I've been doing this for 12 years now. And I think, you know, it's still something that you know, there'll be poems that I wrote a few years ago that I look back at and I say like, I would write that differently, or I would perform that differently. And I think as you continue to grow and evolve as a writer, that's the goal in many ways. You always want to be sort of, hopefully you are never the same person. You know, the poem you all saw, The Danger of Silence, was recorded in 2014, so 6 years ago. And, you know, my life looked fundamentally differently 6 years ago than it does now. And, you know, I see that poem and it's so fascinating because it's a time capsule of like who I was and how I thought about the world at that moment. And if I were to write that same poem now, I would probably write it a little bit differently. But I think that's like what it means to be human. It's like you grow and change and evolve. And so that's a long way of saying, watch lots of videos, read lots of books, and practice, practice, practice.
Awesome. Thanks again for answering that. We have a question from a student named Delilah. Hello, Dr. Smith. I wanted to know if you are aware that your work is being used in classrooms. In my school, we recently had to analyze one of your poems for an assignment. I just wanted to thank you for speaking today, and I loved your work, and I'm happy to see you in person, quotes.
I wish we could all be in person together. Hopefully in the after times when this is all done, we can be together. But yeah, no, I feel so grateful that my work is taught in schools. I mean, it is beyond anything I could have imagined. I wrote the book, which is Counting Dissent, came out 4 years ago almost now. I wrote this book because I thought about what was the kind of book I would have wanted. I felt very disconnected from poetry in high school. I felt like I read a lot of poems from people, poems that I didn't understand. And it was strange to me because I was like, am I not supposed to understand what these people are saying? Like, is it supposed to be really hard to read? Am I supposed to not know what any of this means? Like, is that what poetry, and I thought that's what poetry was for a long time. I was like, oh, I guess if you want to be a poet, you have to write things that no one will understand. But that's not what being a poet should be, right? Like, that's not, I think there are lots of different ways to be a poet and lots of different ways to create and write poetry. And so for me, I thought about what was the kind of book that I would have wanted to read when I was in high school? What is the kind of book that would have told the stories that I thought were meaningful? What's the kind of book that would have just like been not compromised, not sacrificed a level of like artistic rigor for accessibility? I wanted to write a poetry book that somebody who never reads poetry could pick up and say like, oh, okay, I understand what this person's saying. I understand what these poems mean. Because complexity for complexity's sake that's not my style. And I'd much rather write things that people, that my mom or my grandma or neighbor can pick up and read, than to try and write something that nobody understands. So I'm very grateful for all the high school teachers who have shared my work with their students, and it's been more than I could have ever hoped for. So I just feel very thankful to all of them.
Wonderful. We have a few more questions in the chat from students. Wyatt asks, he says, hello, Dr. Smith. Thank you for coming and talking to us today. I was wondering if you had any advice about public speaking and how to get better at it.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of answered a little bit before, but you can't underestimate the importance of practicing. So for that TED Talk that you all saw, I practiced that talk, which was a shorter talk. It was only, a poem. It was like a talk that sort of transitioned into a poem. It was only 5 minutes, but I did that poem probably every day for like 3 months. I just said it over and over and over and over and over again. I mean, I didn't listen to music. I didn't like, if I had my headphones in, it was so that when I'm walking down the street and I'm mouthing the poem, it didn't look like I was, a person who talks to themselves. I was like, I haven't put my headphones in, so when I'm walking down the street, people don't think I'm talking to myself while I'm trying to practice my poem. And I did it in the shower. I did it when I was playing basketball. I did it when I was walking the dog. I did it, I practiced and I practiced and I practiced. Because when I also started public speaking a lot, I had a lisp. And so like I would trip over my tongue a lot. And sometimes it would sound like I had like a really bad lisp. And that's something I had to work at, right? So for some people, they're dissuaded from public speaking because, they stutter or they have a lisp or they don't feel like they're able to articulate certain words and syllables in an effective way. But I just practiced and over again. And your mouth is a muscle in many ways. And so you train it and you practice it and it becomes more comfortable moving, your tongue sort of moving around language. It becomes more comfortable moving around language in a different sort of way. And then, to the point from the young man whose question I answered before, I watched other people who were good at public speaking. And I looked closely and I'm trying to figure out what is it that made them able to do that well. And I think, a website like TED.com is a gold mine because you can go look at all these people who make a living from professional speaking, talking about all sorts of different subjects. And some have different styles. Some are very calm, and some are very animated, and some use like their body, some move across the stage a lot, some stand in one place. And over time, you kind of figure out what's your style. And but the best way to do it is to practice truly. And that can be practicing for yourself. That can be practicing in front of friends. It can be practicing in front of your family. And it can feel silly, right? Like to say, like, I'm going to stand by my kitchen table and try to like practice reading this thing. But I promise you, it will make you better. That's what I've done.
We have another question asking for another sort of tip from a student in the chat. And Ekelin says, "Hi, Dr. Smith. Thank you for being here. I love the TED Talk that was shown to us today. Sometimes during writing, we get unmotivated. What are some tips to stay motivated during writing?"
Yeah, I mean, I'm the sort of person that just thinks inspiration is everywhere. You know, I don't necessarily believe in waiting for inspiration to strike or waiting for your muse. Or oftentimes when I don't know what to write, I read other people's work. So I'll pick up a book, either one that I've read before or a new book, and I'll read until, you know, and sometimes somebody will use a word or a sentence that and that just compels me. And I'm like, okay, now it just gives you a starting place from which to move. Sometimes I'll sit back and listen to music. A lot of times I'll close my laptop or close my notebook and I'll go on a walk, and I won't listen to, you know, a podcast. I won't listen to music. I just go on a walk. And a lot of time you'll be surprised how like moving your body allows your mind to move in a different sort of way. And a lot of my, you know, in this book, the vast majority of the poems in this book came to me while I was walking, because this was written my first and second year of graduate school, and I would walk 20 minutes from my apartment to campus and then 20 minutes back. And most of these poems came from the walk back and forth to school. And so, you know, going out for a walk, I think, can be really helpful.
Excellent. I know we are running short on time. We have a couple more questions, hopefully, that we can squeeze in, one on camera and another one in the chat. Jemica?
Yeah, so we have a question from a student named Carla. So we're going to go ahead and unmute you now so you can ask that on camera.
Hey, first of all, I loved the speech. Very great speech. I aspire to be a good public speaker. Just a question, how do you recommend we get into poetry? You know, I like writing, but never really tried poetry, but definitely want to try. But it just feels so difficult and like you can't do it.
Yeah, I mean, I felt the exact same way when I was a student. I just read a lot of poems that were like, I would read and I didn't understand them. I'd flip through and be like, what is Shakespeare talking about? I don't understand what this means. Like, what is Robert Frost? And I love Shakespeare and I love Frost now, but part of why I love them now is because I realized that that's not what poetry has to be. For a long time, I thought that if you didn't write like Shakespeare, or if you didn't write like Robert Frost, or if you didn't write like Walt Whitman, then you couldn't be a poet, right? But it's important to remember that that's only one way to write. And I think part of what I was worried about was I was like, oh, if I don't write like this, then poetry's not for me. Or if I don't like reading poems like this, poetry's not for me. But instead, it's important to remember that there's like a whole broad spectrum of poetry that exists. And so a lot of, I think one thing that's neat is that today, in the moment we're living now, there are a lot of young writers of color who are writing poems and a lot of them are my friends who are writing, because poetry, you would think that it's a thing that's only written by dead white, European guys. And it's not the case, right? There are so many people from so many different backgrounds, so many different historical moments, and so many people today who are writing beautiful, incredible poetry. So I would also say, if you go to Button Poetry or Button Poetry on YouTube, the YouTube channel, loads and loads of incredible poets there. They basically would go to all of these different poetry events and they would film people. And it brings poetry alive in a different way than some of the poems that you might be hearing now. And then if there's a poet whose work you really liked when you heard them say it on YouTube, then I would look and see if they have a book, because oftentimes so many of the poems that you love via video, there's something really special about having it in front of you and like physically being able to hold it in your hand. So the poets are out there. We just you might have to work a little bit harder to find them.
Excellent. Thank you so much. We will take our last question from the chat, and that is from Caroline, who asks, I was wondering what the best way is to let a close friend or family know that what they said is not okay.
It's such an important question. Unfortunately, there's not one answer. It's kind of like I mentioned before. My style is to take someone aside and try to have a conversation with them one-on-one rather than doing it in front of a bunch of people, because I think that people are more open to hearing what you have to say if you do it in that way. Sometimes it is necessary to do it in front of people. Sometimes that is when it's most important to say it, so that no one thinks that, because if you don't say it while other people are around, then the other people might think, even if they're thinking to themselves, oh, that wasn't okay. If they don't see anybody else say something, then they might say like, oh, well, maybe something's wrong with me that I was offended by that. But because they'll start to question whether or not they are overthinking it, or if they are too sensitive. It's a long way of saying it really depends on the situation, and it depends a lot on your relationship with that person. I might respond differently to something my brother said, or respond in a different way to something my brother said than how I would respond to something that my sister said. So it depends, and you just kind of do your best to figure out. And it's likely gonna be uncomfortable for both people. But again, just think about what you would want, how you would want somebody to behave, and what you would want somebody to say if someone was talking about you or a group that you identify with, and you weren't in that room. And I think that's often what animates the way that I respond to these situations.
Dr. Smith, thank you so much for being here with us today. On a final note, we have students joining us today, but we also have their teachers. And I know that as an educator, you've taken the work of James Baldwin as a model, that teachers should push students to understand that the world was molded by people who came before, and that it can be remolded into something new. So I wanted to know, what can you tell the students today about the world that we're in this moment, and what advice can you offer to fellow teachers?
Ooh, the world we live in this moment is a scary one. But I think it is important nothing about this world is inevitable. Nothing about this world is static. I mentioned in the poem, there's a line, the moral arc of the universe and how it bends. And people often talk about the Dr. Martin Luther King quote, the moral arc of the universe bends toward justice. But you have to remember that it doesn't bend on its own. People have to pull on it. People have to bend it. It is not a thing that naturally arches. It's a thing that has to be pushed and pulled and hammered and nailed. And a metaphor that I use all the time that I give people is, because I think part of what's also true is that some of the things we all want to work and write and teach and learn toward a better world. What is also true is that it is important for us not to get caught up in feeling as if we are doing that work so that we ourselves can see it. I think all the time about the history of slavery. I think about how slavery existed for more than 250 years in this country, almost 300 years. I think how people were fighting to end slavery from the day that enslaved people first arrived on this continent. But the vast majority of people who fought against slavery never got to see the end of it. Does that mean that the work that they did was for nothing? Does that mean that the work they did was in vain? No, but like they were chipping against the wall, and they were chipping and chipping and chipping and chipping, and the people who came after them were chipping and chipping and chipping, and the people who came after them were chipping and chipping and chipping. And that's what all of us are doing. We're all chipping away at this wall, and we don't know how big the wall is. We don't know how long until we'll see the light on the other side, but we're doing this work not even so that we can necessarily see it, but so that people who come behind us can see it. And that's what every social movement, that's what every activist, that's what every advocate does, is they try to chip away at this wall of oppression, chip away at this wall of violence, chip away at this wall of silence, to make it so that we're building a better world for the people who come with the hammers after us. And we may see the light at the end of the tunnel, and we may not, but part of it is that this project, this goal, is much bigger than us. And I think if we remember that we are part of a world and part of a lineage that extends far beyond us, then we won't worry so much about whether or not we can be immediately gratified by the work that we do, and instead understand it as part of a long tradition and a long lineage of people who came before us, and a long lineage of people who will come after us.
Thank you. I think that that's a great note to end the conversation on. We're looking forward to the release of the nonfiction. I believe it's in 2021.
Yep.
And wanted to also let everyone know that you'll all be receiving a copy of Dr. Smith's poetry collection, Counting Descent. So be on the lookout for that as well after this.
Thank you all so much. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for being here.
Certainly.
Okay.
Hello, my name is Leslie, and I read a beautiful poem by Sophia Parsons of Utah. Sophia, your poem moved me greatly. It was full of anger, but also hope. And I hope that this coming year is full of light and justice and peace for you and your family and friends and all the students for this year's Do the Right Thing. So thank you for sharing this poem with us. And now I'm going to read a small excerpt from it. She cries and cries, waiting to be seen, wondering why her parents are so mean. What has she done to make them despise her so? That is, until she began to grow. Till she had some time to stop and think that maybe she was the missing link. Had her tears fallen from honest eyes, or ones filled with cloudy lies? Her parents didn't hate her, of that she was now sure. They had changed, grown, and matured. So why hadn't the same thing happened to her? Then she took her life back into her own hands. I hope you all are able to take your lives back into your own hands. I wish you nothing but the best.
I am not a stranger to the dawn. Hide away, they say, 'cause we don't want your broken parts. Learn to be ashamed of all my scars. Run away, they say, no one will love you as you sharpest words gonna cut me down. Gonna send a flood, gonna drown them out. And this is brave, this is bruised, this is who I'm meant to be. This is me. Look out, 'cause here I come. And I'm marching down to a beat I drum. I'm not scared to be seen. I make no apologies. This is me. This is me.
Hello again, everyone. This is Besma Reyes, Executive Director at the Kuwait America Foundation. As they say, all good things must come to an end. But before we wrap up this weekend's recognition weekend, first of all, again, I'd like to thank Dendel Hoyt for her amazing performance and rendition of This Is Me and A Million Dreams. Also, special thanks to our inspiring speakers this weekend, Clint Smith, Asia Mayrock, and Ryan Pascal. Your words resonate with us all, and we are so grateful to have you with us. Of course, none of this would be possible without the continued support of our primary sponsors, the Kuwait America Foundation and the Kuwait Foundation for the Advancement of Sciences. For the past 21 years, your generosity has provided the Do the Right Thing program with the funds and resources necessary to make a positive impact on over 2.5 million middle school students around the country. For that, we are eternally grateful. Also, many thanks to Southwest Airlines for being a national sponsor of the Do the Right Thing program since 2007. As the most of you have experienced these last few months, you know, things have had to change with how we go about our daily business. And like all of you, we at the Kuwait America Foundation and Do the Right Thing had to take our daily work virtually. Well, this week's program and production of this recognition weekend could not have been at all possible without the amazing work and dedication of our staff and volunteers. If you didn't know this already, we're a small family here at the Kuwait America Foundation and National Campaign to Stop Violence. And although small, I am truly blessed to have a group of very talented individuals working with me, who not only love what they do, but love this program. Thanks to our core crew, Shireen, Mohammed, Lisa, Marouj, and Derek. Heartfelt gratitude to our extended CAF and DtWT family, Amber, Radwa, Aliyah, Al, Jemica, Alberto, Iman, Hannah, and Shant. All of our guests this year will be receiving a copy of our 2020 Book of Writings. In celebration of the 25th anniversary, we created a special cover for this year's edition. And if you pay close attention, you'll notice that the number 25 on the cover features graphics of all of our participating cities, past and present. I would like to take this opportunity to thank Mio Alzugare, the creative mind and designer behind this beautiful graphic. Thank you, Mio. So, as I mentioned in yesterday's closing remarks, we have a special announcement this year for our student ambassadors. In recognition and gratitude for sharing your personal stories and making a written commitment to stopping violence, the Kuwait America Foundation will be sending you an array of special gifts, which I'm featuring here in this basket. In addition to receiving a copy of Asia Mayrock's and Clint Smith's books, we have put together a few essential items that we thought would be fun and beneficial. So please make sure we have your updated mailing addresses. Also, for our guest and student readers who submitted videos, we will be featuring your videos on social media in the coming weeks.
Congratulations to all 2020 Do the Right Thing National Student Ambassadors.
Thank you, first and foremost, for giving me the great gift of perspective. It's been an honor to read your words, and yes, congratulations.
You guys are amazing young people. I know you're going to do great things in the future. You're already doing great things right now.
These are unprecedented times, but I'm so glad that we were able to find a way to celebrate your accomplishment virtually. I have been a volunteer for the National Campaign to Stop Violence for 4 years now, and every year I am always so inspired by your stories. I've had the opportunity to read through your essays, and I just want to say that each and every one of you is so very talented, and I know that you all will contribute to making this world a better place.
I'm sure that your words will have an impact on your fellow students, and perhaps even, hopefully so, your political representation in Congress.
You should be so proud of yourselves, as should be your educators, guardians, and parents.
Continue to be that friendly face. Continue to spread your positive messages to help put an end to youth violence.
Through these experiences, I've been able to witness some of the brightest, courageous, and most forward-thinking students our generation has to offer. As a young person myself, still trying to find my voice to speak out against injustices I see, I'm always reminded of our national ambassadors and the bravery they took to not only speak out, but stand up.
Injustices are all around us, but now we do not have to take them on alone. With the help of technology, one's voice has never been more impactful than it is today. Student ambassadors, just as you have done here, let that voice always be yours. Along your journey, as Tyler said so eloquently, always give others a chance. Be sure to stand up for the weak. Share the love and spread the word. Congratulations, and thank you for taking on this challenge.
Well said. So, on a final note, I have a call to action. I'd like to announce that as of today, we are asking everyone to join us in sharing your stories through our newly launched social media campaign, #WriteOn. In the spirit of encouraging our youth to write their stories of challenges, triumphs, and survival through Do the Right Thing, #WriteOn is our renewed commitment to rise up to our students' unmatched aspirations. We are inviting you to join them and share your stories of perseverance, resilience, and hope by tagging us at DtWT Challenge and use #WriteOn. More information about this is also available on our event website at dtwt2020.org, in addition to our general website, dtwt.org. So we ask you to #WriteOn to help us continue our legacy of sharing our students' stories and learning of yours. We welcome you to do the right thing. Thank you and take care.